What we understand now is that agriculture has a close relationship with climate. We know that. But what we've discovered is that it's kind of a hill-shaped relationship, that there's sort of this optimal temperature zone where crops grow most rapidly or most productive, and that if you're either too cold or you're too hot, that's disadvantageous. So you can see the too cold already. I mean, if you go way up to the top of the Alps, you don't see a lot of grape orchards up there. You know, that's too cold a place for agriculture to be supported. And similarly, if you go to a very hot place, the middle of the equator, there are places there which are possibly too hot for crops to survive. So we know that on the extremes, those are less advantageous. And we also know that there's this middle ground where we find most of the fertile agriculture in the world. And you see that in the Mediterranean, you see it in the middle of the United States, you see that in some parts of China, where there's sort of these moderate temperatures which seem to be ideal for crops to grow. So if you grasp this idea that it's a hill-shaped relationship, if you're in an area that's already too cold, if you're up in the north, very far north, or high altitudes, and it gets a little bit warmer, that's actually going to help you climb the hill. And it's beneficial, at least for a while it's beneficial. If you're in the top of the hill and the temperature change is moderate, you'll stay on the top of the hill. But if you're on the right-hand side of that hill, if you're already in a place that is, in some sense, too hot, and the temperatures increase, it immediately is harmful. So you get these very different effects, and depending on where you're starting. And one of the things you realize immediately is, well, where you're starting depends on where you live. And if you're in the northern European area, well, then you're probably going to benefit from warming. If you're in mid-European, you're probably on the top of the hill, and you're okay as long as it doesn't warm up too much. But if you're in an area that's too hot, which is the mid-tropics, where most of the human population lives, if you're there already, then this is bad right from the start. And the more temperature, the more it increases, the warmer it gets, the worse it's going to be for them. So it's a very different set of effects depending on where you are. So that's something we understand clearly with respect to climate and agriculture. But it's true that it appears to be true in other sectors as well, that there's kind of this hill-shaped relationship. Just exactly what it looks like is different depending on the sector, but it seems to be true also for heating and cooling. If you're in a very cold place and it warms, you're probably going to get a heating benefit. But if you're in a moderate place, you're going to get a heating benefit and a cooling loss, and it's going to kind of level off. They'll balance each other out. But if you're already in a warm place, you're already in Italy, southern Italy, and it warms up, this is just a cooling loss. There's going to be very little heating benefits associated with that. And so that's clearly going to be harmful. So you get this kind of distributional stuff in that sector as well. Sea level rise, we know the more it rises, the worse it is, but that's a place that's only going to affect people on the coast. If you're inland, well inland, you're not going to be affected at all by sea level rise. The water sector is very complicated in terms of the spatial distribution of that, because we're not actually sure how the distribution of water is going to change in different parts of the planet. So we know that in general water is going to increase. There's going to be the water cycle is going to increase, so there'll be more evaporation, but there'll also be more precipitation for the planet. But it's also very likely that where rain tends to fall might shift. It might shift further north or might shift south, depending on how all the changes associated with climate change affect wind patterns. And that's something that the models aren't very clear about yet. Some models think that there's going to be big shifts, some models think there'll be small shifts, some models think it'll get drier, some think it'll get wetter. And so there's a huge amount of uncertainty about how that's going to actually play out across the planet.